this lamp? Where did we get this lamp? This is a great lamp. It's a really nice lamp. Tell me more.
Oh, hello there!
Oh, hello!
10 hut! At ease, soldier. It is I, the General.
And I'm the Professor.
We are Pittsburgh Connections, and we're here to talk to you about our new LARP 1919.
To end all wars.
Last video we talked about small arms, shotguns, pistols. Today, what are we going to talk about?
We are going to talk about close combat weapons, knives, stabbing weapons, swords that may have been left over from the beginning of the war that they probably wouldn't be using as much at this point.
Improvised weaponry?
Oh, improvised weapons are a real thing. And you know what? Shovels, of all things.
Entrenching tools?
Well, yeah, you're going to see a little bit of everything today.
So in many LARPs that you probably played at home, you might be using something like this. This is a boffer weapon. Now, a lot of these are constructed from PVC pipe cores on the inside, and then probably a pool noodle foam. You could probably get one of these at the dollar store for $1 or so. And then on the tips, you have what's called open cell foam. When you construct this, you have your PVC pipe core. You then place your pool noodle foam underneath, and at the tips and at the pommel, you use open cell. That way you can stab your opponent and it's completely safe. Mm-hmm. However, what are some other styles of LARP weapons out there? Well,
here we've got a nice latex sword, and these things, they're not as great with the stabbing, but they can take quite a beating, and they are much lighter and thinner and just look cooler. But honestly, these will be a little bit more expensive, so you have to think a little bit more before you buy one of these.
On average, you go to a hardware store, buy PVC pipe, that's under $5. As we said, foam could be from the dollar store.
Oh yeah.
The open cell that we have here is actually packaging material. And of course you're wrapping it all in duct tape and maybe some paracord. So
if you know what you're doing, you can make them look pretty good. The ones that have seen a little bit more wear and tear obviously don't look as great, but you can make a pretty decent looking boffer that way. Something like this, this is I believe from the Battle Ready line.
Oh yeah. This is somewhere between $30, $40, or $50.
Probably around that price range, and it's pretty good for what you get.
If you're concerned about losing some detail, making a boffer weapon or making a homemade one, you might consider something like this. Now what you have here is a carbon fiber rod on the inside, again, just like the latex versions, but instead of using pool noodle foam, you're actually using compression foam, something that you would see like more in a yoga mat. You seal that together using an epoxy, and then you seal it entirely with a latex spray. So they sometimes might call these like a plastidip or a plastic dipped LARP weapon. You get more detail, it's a thinner profile than the boffer weapon. The biggest issue is sometimes in the winter these get really hard.
It can get a little bit hard when it gets cold, but I feel like, you sacrifice a little bit of that softness for something that is more dynamic and detailed. And you know what? This is one of those weapons that would also be slightly within genre, because cavalry sabers were still being used at the beginning of the war, although by the end of the war, things were a little different.
Let's talk about genre before we begin as well, because this is a World War I game, so we're looking at 1914 to obviously 1919.
1919, yes.
You probably cannot get away with any of these kind of fantasy weapons.
Medieval weapons, yeah, that's just a little bit out of genre. Something made like this that was made to look sort of like a very generalized axe, wood-cutting axe, something like that. That would be just fine for a melee weapon if you wanted to use that.
That thing looks like hell.
It's been through hell.
We've talked about improvised weapons, we talked about swords. What happens if you're stuck with your pants down? You have no weapon, no pistol? Can you use good old righty and left hooky?
Well, you certainly can, but they might look a little bit different.
You may have seen at other LARPs, they want to represent you using your fists, but obviously you can't use left. So what do?
You make some fist boffers out of that same foam that we made the sword out of. These are a lot less detailed and a lot easier to make. I've seen people make large batches of these just so everyone can have at least one, weapon where they can just say, oh, I'm punching you type of weapon. If you're concerned about using a coreless foam boffer fist, you can always use a PVC pipe and foam boffer fist. And this is just a very thin pipe and some very thin insulation and just a little padding on the top and the bottom here. This is just perfect for your standard punching attack weapon.
Part of every soldier's kit, they should have themselves an entrenching tool. What we have here is a foam boffer shovel. We used a PVC pipe core in the center, we used pipe foam around it, and then open cell foam on all corners. Tell us about shovels.
Well, I mean, everyone had shovels back then for digging the trenches and everything like that. So they would have to go on trench raids, and one of the things they realized was sometimes it was good just to have something good that was very
quiet. You don't want to
right
give away your position with a pistol shot.
You could smack someone real good with a shovel like this. What they would do is they would sharpen up the edges and then just go whack. And this was a great weapon for those very, very close quarters of being very in the trenches. Then they would use them for that.
It's kind of ironic. We talk about the trenches being hundreds and hundreds of yards from your enemy. During a trench raid, you might be within feet of your enemy. You might also have some sort of a hammer. This here is a more like a mallet-style hammer. But we also have sort of like a rock hammer here too. Now we use these in our cowboy game, our Wild West game, as part of our mining tools. But again, entrenching in World War I, they actually would have
all these tools, yeah.
They would have miners. One of the tactics would be to dig under the trenches and try to attack the enemy. So conceivably, having a rock hammer or having some other entrenching tool while fighting within those tunnels could be a possibility. Even the most basic soldier could probably carry a knife with them, though, correct?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. This one is very short and to the point. Fun fact, the war that made the Swiss Army knife a common mainstay, World War I.
Huh, I didn't know that. Now let's say you want to get a little more up close and personal with your enemy. You might use something like this.
Whoa.
Now this is a recreation of a trench knife. Obviously much larger than the other knife that we have here.
Right.
With that kind of brass knuckle look there. Now obviously you don't want...
That's more of a late war look too. Once they realized what people were doing in the trenches, they started to make their weapons specialized towards that. So people, at the end of the war, there were less clubs and things like that, and just more things that were designed to be in those close quarters.
Finally, we have the Lark mainstay.
Swords.
Finally, we have the Lark mainstay.
Swords. Said you weren't gonna laugh.
Finally, we have the Lark mainstay.
Swords.
Whether it's a pirate LARP, a fantasy LARP, or even a post-apocalyptic LARP, most people are using swords at their LARPs. So, can you use a sword here in World War I?
Absolutely. Early war, there would have still been cavalry charges with, men with cavalry sabers charging in and trying to swing their swords. Obviously, there might still be a few of those sabers around, but with the invention of the machine gun, you're not going to see horses charging around, but there will still be some of these weapons around.
Another LARP mainstay is throwing weapons. Everyone loves throwing weapons, whether it's throwing knives, throwing stars, throwing... That's not a throwing weapon!
Well, it looks like a wrench, but it's entirely made out of foam.
So, so you can make any kind of throwing weapon you want as long as it's out of soft foam or it's made out of pipe foam.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Probably don't put a core in it.
No.
This here is a Camisil bottle.
Calamasil. Is it Calamasil?
I think it's Calamasil.
Okay.
It's Calamasil. This is a Calamasil bottle. As you can see in the bottom, they actually have it cut out there to make it coreless and actually helps you throw it better.
We're using this as sort of to represent a Molotov cocktail of sorts, which is one of the grenade-type weapons we're going to be using in our game.
Now, obviously, Molotov cocktails, a little out of period. The term itself, Molotov cocktail, is obviously from World War II, but a firebomb works just as well. That is a mainstay of any insurgent group.
And the way we'll have you use this is simply tie something around the top here, and the call we're using for these is grenade. So you throw this at someone, you say grenade, and they are to basically everyone who's within a cinematic amount of range, roughly a step of the person who it's being thrown at.
A step, 5 foot. I think a step, or I've seen a lot of games do arm length. If you're within arm length of where that has fallen, that would count it as an explosion.
And we have a couple of different types of explosive weapons that we'll be using in our game too. Like this here is a stick of dynamite that you might see. This is your old potato masher stick grenade that you might see.
Now to help you with some of this, because again, if you just take a piece of foam, tape it up, put a little string on it, and throw it, it's going to throw like heck. It is not going to fly. The tip that we've seen people do is they put a little baggie of sand in here.
Just a tiny bit of sand, and it makes all the difference.
You can kind of hear it in there.
You can hear it. I can hear it.
A little bit of sand gives it a little bit of weight, and again, it's super safe. No cores are in these. You should be able to bend these around. Again, the call is just grenade and throw it. We're not screaming damage calls. We're not stopping the game and calling a hold and counting out the distance. If you get hit, if it's close to you, it's probably going to be an explosion. And again, cinematically play it to be an explosion.
Exactly.
Any other throwing weapons that we have?
Got one of these here. This is just an axe that I made for a different LARP, but still good for this one. And if, these are not that hard to make. 2 different colors of duct tape and some foam, and you're good to go.
I think with that one, the head of it is so large because we were concerned about getting it spinning when you're throwing it in the air.
It worked. It worked. It was just 2 parts, and it completely works fine.
So realistic authenticity, grenades, absolutely. Potentially firebombs, of course. Dynamite.
Well, you said there were miners. You said there were miners. I guess they're using their dynamite.
Improvised weaponry.
Improvised weaponry.
Of course. Now, have I ever read accounts of soldiers carrying throwing knives on their persons and throwing axes and throwing wrenches? That could be where a little bit of the gaminess can come.
You're falling a little bit into movie territory, but hey, we said we wanted cinematic.
We want cinematic. We want you to throw a knife at someone, and as they're laying there on the ground, you say, "Stick around." Hopefully, you now found some weapon you can take with you into the trenches and help you beat back the Hun.
Well, there is one last thing we haven't talked about, and next time...
Wait, hold on. What do you mean? We talked about rifles, talked about shotguns, we talked about some machine guns. What could be left?
Well, looks like you haven't taken a trip into no man's land.
So next week, we're going to be talking about machine guns.
Oh yeah, the big guns.
We got some surprises for you, ladies and gentlemen.
Until then, stay in the trenches.
At ease, soldier.
Way to Tipperary, it's a long way to go. It's a long way to Tipperary, to the sweetest girl I know. Goodbye, Piccadilly.